21 miles. That is all that separates the coastlines of Iran and Oman at the narrowest point of the Strait of Hormuz. 21 miles of dark, shallow water through which roughly 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply passes every single day. And for weeks, Iran had turned those 21 miles into the most dangerous corridor on the planet. Then, in the space of a single night, everything changed. At this very moment, the most consequential maritime military operation since the Second World War is drawing to its decisive conclusion, and the weapon that broke Iran's stranglehold was not a missile, not a warship, and not a diplomatic ultimatum. It was a 5,000-pound steel projectile that fell from 30,000 feet and buried itself deep into the bedrock of Iran's most fortified underground facilities before detonating with a force that collapsed decades of military infrastructure in a matter of seconds. In a moment, you will understand exactly how the United States dismantled Iran's 40-year doctrine for closing the Strait of Hormuz, and why the method Washington chose has permanently rewritten the rules of modern power projection. But first, you must understand precisely what Iran built, what it planned, and just how close the global economy came to the edge of catastrophe. For 4 decades, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operated on a single foundational doctrine that Iran did not need to defeat the United States military in open battle. It only needed to make the cost of confrontation unbearable. The Strait of Hormuz was the instrument of that doctrine. A geographic choke point so irreplaceable, so economically indispensable, that threatening it was equivalent to holding a knife to the throat of the entire industrialized world. Now, let's take a closer look at the map. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a body of water. It is the single outlet through which the oil exports of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran itself must pass before reaching the open ocean. There is no viable alternative route for this volume of energy. Close the strait, and you do not merely inconvenience the global economy, you begin to suffocate it. Fuel prices surge within days. Supply chains fracture within weeks. Economies that depend on imported energy begin to buckle within months. Iran's strategy to exploit this vulnerability was not improvised. It was the product of meticulous, long-range planning. Underground tunnel complexes carved into the mountain slopes along Iran's southern coastline housed hundreds of anti-ship cruise missiles weapons like the Noor, the Qadr, and the Abu Mahdi, each designed to fly at near sea level, beneath radar detection thresholds, and strike oil tankers or naval vessels with lethal precision. Mobile launch platforms were dispersed across the coastline, constantly repositioning to avoid satellite detection. Radar relay networks wove a surveillance web across the entire strait, and beneath the surface of the water itself, IRGC operatives began laying mines, specifically the Maham series limpet mines, designed to attach to the hulls of commercial vessels and detonate silently, without warning, turning every passing tanker into a potential casualty. The early weeks of the crisis confirmed Iran's confidence in this strategy. Ship crossings through the strait collapsed. From a pre-crisis daily average of 138 vessel transits, the number had fallen to just 3 per day by the 3rd week of March. 3. The arteries of global energy supply had been reduced to a trickle. The economic pressure was already registering in oil markets across every continent. Iran believed it had played its most powerful card. It was catastrophically wrong. The decisive instrument of America's response was a bomb that had never before been used in actual combat, a weapon whose operational debut in the Strait of Hormuz will be studied in military academies for generations. The GBU-72 Advanced 5K Penetrator entered the war not with a press conference or a public announcement, but with the quiet, absolute finality of 5,000 pounds of precision-guided steel arriving at terminal velocity. What makes the GBU-72 categorically different from any previous bunker-busting munition is its extraordinary capacity for deep penetration. Equipped with GPS and inertial navigation guidance systems, it can locate its target with accuracy measured in single-digit meters in daylight, in darkness, through cloud cover, through smoke. Once it strikes, its hardened steel casing does not simply detonate on the surface. It drives through reinforced concrete, through compressed rock, through layers of earth that Iran's engineers had spent decades stacking above their most sensitive facilities. The bomb's delayed fuse ensures it reaches full depth before detonation. When the warhead finally fires, the shockwave has nowhere to escape. It reflects off surrounding rock and collapses the underground structure from within, as though the mountain itself has turned against the facility it was built to protect. Multiple GBU-72S were released against hardened targets running along the northern shore of the strait in a single coordinated strike package. The underground cave storing Iran's anti-ship cruise missile stockpiles, facilities that conventional munitions had simply been unable to threaten, ceased to exist before dawn. Decades of accumulated inventory, years of logistical preparation, the entire physical foundation of Iran's denial strategy was compressed into rubble beneath the rock it had been built to hide within. United States Central Command Commander Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed in subsequent briefings that Iran's operational missile stockpile had been reduced by 90%. That figure is not a statistic. It is a strategic obituary for the doctrine Iran had staked its regional dominance upon. What the world witnessed in that decisive final night was the culmination of a systematic air campaign that had been unfolding with relentless precision across the preceding weeks. It did not begin with the GBU-72. It began with the aircraft that are the most feared in the history of strategic aviation, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. Departing from the continental United States on missions lasting 37 hours with multiple aerial refueling contacts, penetrated Iranian airspace without detection. Iran's air defense network, sophisticated, layered, and expensive, registered nothing. The B-2's radar cross-section is smaller than that of a large bird. It arrived, struck, and departed before Iranian radar operators understood what had happened. Its targets in the early phase were Iran's ballistic missile infrastructure and the deepest hardened facilities, struck with 2,000-pound penetrator munitions and the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator. Meanwhile, B-1B Lancer bombers, operating on 34-hour global strike missions that exploited their supersonic sprint capability and enormous weapons payload, targeted Iran's anti-ship missile storage facilities and coastal battery emplacements. These strikes were methodical and sequential. Each sortie removed another layer of Iran's ability to threaten vessels in the strait. Radar relay stations went dark. Mobile launcher positions that Iranian forces believed were concealed were struck before they could reposition. Intelligence nodes that coordinated IRGC naval operations were systematically eliminated. The B-52 Stratofortress joined the campaign, targeting drone production and storage infrastructure, torpedo manufacturing facilities, and the coastal launch platforms that Iran had used to deploy its fleet of Shahed-type kamikaze unmanned aerial vehicles and explosive-laden unmanned surface vessels. The B-52's capacity for sustained airborne presence created a state of continuous psychological and operational pressure that Iranian forces could not relieve. In total, the air campaign struck over 9,000 individual targets. More than 100 Iranian naval vessels and small craft were destroyed. The operational scale of this campaign had no precedent in the post-Cold War era. Destroying Iran's underground missile arsenals removed its long-range conventional strike capability, but it did not neutralize the asymmetric threat that had plagued the strait since the opening days of the crisis, the fast attack boat swarms that the IRGC Navy had deployed as its maritime harassment instrument. These vessels operated in coordinated groups, approaching commercial tankers at high speed from multiple directions simultaneously, exploiting their small radar signature and high maneuverability to complicate defensive responses. In the early weeks of the crisis, this tactic had proven devastatingly effective. 2 separate drone attacks on oil tankers had already been executed. The maritime threat picture in the strait was, by any objective assessment, extraordinarily complex. The United States answered it with the A-10 Thunderbolt II, a ground attack aircraft designed in the 1970s that has somehow, against every institutional prediction, remained the most brutally effective close support platform in the American arsenal. At the heart of the A-10 is the GAU-8 Avenger, a 7-barreled 30mm rotary cannon capable of firing 3,900 rounds per minute. Its armor-piercing rounds can destroy a fast attack boat in a burst of less than 2 seconds. But it is not the cannon alone that makes the A-10 the ideal instrument for this environment. It is the aircraft's ability to fly low, fly slow, and remain on station for extended periods, hunting, identifying, and eliminating surface threats with a patience and persistence that no other fixed-wing aircraft can replicate. Operating in direct coordination with AH-64E Apache attack helicopters armed with Hellfire missiles, 30mm chain guns, the A-10S systematically dismantled the IRGC's fast boat fleet. The combination proved decisive. Where Iran had previously used swarm tactics with relative impunity, it now faced an airborne hunter-killer team that could loiter above the strait indefinitely, engaging any vessel that posed a threat and providing protective cover to minesweeping ships conducting clearance operations below. Simultaneously, a capability that had long been advocated for by naval analysts, but never operationally deployed, made its combat debut. Pentagon spokesperson Tim Hawkins confirmed in an official statement to Reuters that autonomous unmanned surface vessels had been conducting patrol operations throughout the strait during Operation Epic Fury. These 5-meter robotic speedboats accumulated over 450 hours of operational patrol time, capable of fully independent navigation over ranges exceeding 2,000 nautical miles. They served as the strait's first persistent robotic surveillance layer and, when circumstances demanded, as expendable intercept platforms against Iranian small boat threats. Their deployment, analysts widely agreed, had been overdue by years. Every military strategy, regardless of its technological sophistication, depends on human beings to direct it. Remove the architects of a doctrine, and the doctrine loses its capacity to adapt, to respond, to recover. This reality was not lost on the coalition conducting operations in the strait. Admiral Alireza Tangsiri, commander of the IRGC Navy, was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the strategic port city of Bandar Abbas on Iran's southern coast. Tangsiri was not simply a senior military officer. He was the operational mind behind the strait closure strategy, the individual who had directed mine-laying operations, coordinated fast boat swarm deployments, and personally overseen the harassment of commercial shipping that had, according to U.S. Central Command figures, affected hundreds of vessels over the preceding 8 years. His elimination removed the single most consequential decision-maker from Iran's naval command structure at the precise moment when that structure was under its most severe pressure. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, addressing the situation directly during a cabinet session, summarized Iran's current naval posture in terms that left no ambiguity. Iran's capacity to project coordinated naval power in the strait had been fundamentally broken, not temporarily degraded, but structurally dismantled. The picture emerging from the strait today is one of irreversible strategic shift, but not yet complete resolution. Daily vessel transits have climbed from the catastrophic low of 3 during the peak of the crisis to approximately 15 by the final days of March. That figure remains far below the pre-crisis baseline of 138 daily crossings. The strait is not fully open, but the trajectory is unambiguous, and the mechanisms of Iran's blockade doctrine have been shattered beyond any rapid reconstitution. The mines laid during the opening phase of the crisis remain the most immediate residual threat. Clearance operations are expected to require several additional weeks to complete. Britain's Royal Navy has committed its newest generation of autonomous mine-hunting unmanned vessels to the effort, robotic platforms that detect and neutralize mines using acoustic and magnetic signature mimicry, triggering controlled detonations without placing human clearance divers in danger. 22 nations have pledged operational or logistical support to the coalition securing the strait's reopening, following a joint declaration issued on March 19th by the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Japan, and Canada. Iran still retains asymmetric potential: hidden mobile launch platforms that survived the air campaign, drone production capacity that was damaged but not entirely eliminated, the capacity to reconstitute, over time, elements of the threat architecture that has been destroyed. These residual capabilities are real, and they are not dismissed by the analysts tracking this situation in real time. But the fundamental calculus of the Strait of Hormuz has been permanently altered. The doctrine that Iran spent 4 decades and hundreds of billions of dollars constructing the belief that it could hold the world's energy supply hostage through layered denial systems buried deep beneath southern Iranian rock, was tested against the full weight of American precision air power and found to be catastrophically fragile. The underground fortresses are rubble, the missile stockpiles are ash, the naval commander is gone, and the world's most critical waterway is, mile by mile, reopening. At this very moment, the minesweepers are in the water, the autonomous patrol boats are on station, and the A-10S are still in the sky above the strait. The lock has not been fully removed, but the mechanism that kept it closed no longer exists.